The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor of the courthouse lobby, sending crystal fragments skittering across the polished stone like fallen stars. Victoria Sterling stared at the mess she'd just created, her hands still trembling with a cocktail of rage, admiration, and something else she couldn't quite name, something that made her chest tight and her pulse race in ways that had nothing to do with losing a case. Ms. Sterling. The concerned voice of a junior associate broke through her turmoil. "Are you all right? Should I call someone?" No. She was decidedly not all right. 6 months. 6 months of the most brutal, intellectually stimulating, emotionally exhausting legal warfare she'd ever experienced. And it had all come down to this moment. Marcus Blackwood had just won the biggest case of both their careers, and he'd done it by exposing a secret that could destroy everything she'd worked for. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that as she'd watched him deliver his closing argument, as she'd seen the passion and integrity blazing in his dark eyes, as she'd witnessed him systematically demolish his own client's defense in the name of justice, she'd realized something that made her stomach drop and her heart soar simultaneously. She was desperately, irrevocably, completely in love with him. She was in love with the man who had just ruined her life and saved it, and turned everything she thought she knew about herself upside down. "I'm fine," Victoria lied, gathering the scattered pieces of her composure along with her briefcase. "Just celebrating in my own way." As she walked toward the exit on unsteady legs, Victoria caught sight of Marcus across the crowded lobby. He was surrounded by his legal team and what remained of his client's representatives, but he wasn't accepting congratulations. Instead, he looked exhausted, conflicted, and strangely hollow for a man who just won a multi-million-dollar case. Their eyes met across the space filled with reporters and legal professionals, and something passed between them, a moment of connection that felt both electric and devastating, like touching a live wire that you know will burn you but can't bring yourself to release. Then someone blocked her view, and the spell was broken. Victoria fled. This story had started 9 months ago, though Victoria hadn't known it at the time. She'd been working late at Whitmore and Associates, buried in research for what she'd thought would be a routine corporate dispute, when her senior partner had dropped a bombshell that changed the trajectory of her entire life. "Victoria, I'm putting you on the Henderson Industries case," Patricia Whitmore had announced, sliding a thick file across her mahogany desk. The leather portfolio had landed with a thud that seemed to echo through the spacious corner office. "Full lead counsel, this is your shot at making partner." Victoria had nearly dropped her coffee. At 29, she was already one of the youngest senior associates in the firm's 150-year history, but led counsel on a major case. That was partnership track material, the kind of opportunity that came along once in a career. "What's the case about?" she'd asked, trying to keep her voice steady while her heart hammered against her ribs. "Product liability. Henderson Industries manufactures medical devices, specifically a new type of heart valve that's supposed to be revolutionary. Problem is, our client's father died after having one implanted. She claims it was defective." Patricia had leaned back in her chair, studying Victoria with the calculating gaze that had made her one of the most feared litigators on the East Coast. "The family is seeking $50 million in damages." Victoria had felt her pulse quicken. Medical device cases were notoriously complex, involving intricate technical knowledge, expert witnesses, and significant financial stakes. They were also the kind of high-profile cases that made careers. Who's representing Henderson? Patricia's smile had been razor-sharp, the expression of a predator who'd just spotted vulnerable prey. Blackwood and Associates. And I have it on good authority that Marcus Blackwood himself will be taking point. Even then, before she'd ever faced him in a courtroom, Victoria had known Marcus Blackwood's reputation. Harvard Law Review, summa cum laude. Clerked for Justice Reynolds on the Supreme Court. Had never lost a major case in 5 years of practice. He was brilliant, ruthless, devastatingly effective. And according to legal magazines, the most eligible bachelor in corporate law. He was also, according to the legal gossip mill that thrived in their city's tight-knit professional community, incredibly attractive and completely unattainable. The man who broke hearts as efficiently as he won cases, who dated supermodels and socialites, but never anyone from the legal world. He was professional poison wrapped in an Armani suit, and every female lawyer in the city knew to admire him from a safe distance. "Any special strategy you want me to pursue?" Victoria had asked, already mentally cataloging the research she'd need to begin immediately. "Beat him," Patricia had replied simply, her tone suggesting that failure wasn't an option. "Whatever it takes." Victoria. "This firm has never lost to Blackwood and Associates, and I don't intend to start now." Victoria's first meeting with Marcus had been a discovery conference 3 weeks later, held in a sterile conference room that smelled of expensive coffee and nervous sweat. She'd prepared extensively, reviewing every case he'd ever argued, studying his tactics and strategies until she could probably recite his legal philosophy verbatim. She'd expected intellectual intimidation, aggressive posturing, maybe some old-fashioned chauvinism disguised as professional courtesy. She hadn't expected him to be funny. "Ms. Sterling," Marcus had said as they'd settled around the polished conference table, adjusting his silver cufflinks with casual precision. "I have to say, your brief on the admissibility of technical evidence was impressive. Wrong, but impressively wrong? Wrong?" Victoria had raised an eyebrow, feeling her competitive instincts flare to life like a struck match. "Completely, thoroughly, and elegantly wrong. But I appreciated the creativity." His smile had been warm and genuine, not the cold smirk she'd expected from someone with his reputation. So it's refreshing to face an opponent who actually understands the nuances of medical device regulation instead of just throwing legal spaghetti at the wall. Victoria had found herself smiling back before she could stop herself. "Just wait until you see what I do with the manufacturing specifications. You might find that less refreshingly wrong. Looking forward to it, counselor." And just like that, Victoria had realized she was in serious trouble. Not because Marcus Blackwood was intimidating or ruthless, but because he was charming and intelligent and looked at her like she was the most interesting person in the room. When he'd shaken her hand at the end of the meeting, his grip had been firm and warm, and she'd felt an electric shock that had nothing to do with the dry courthouse air, which, she'd reminded herself firmly during the drive back to her office, was probably just another tactical move in his arsenal of courtroom weapons. The Henderson case had consumed Victoria's life over the following months. Henderson Industries' new XR7 heart valve had indeed been defective. But proving it required diving deep into complex engineering reports, medical studies, and manufacturing processes that read like foreign languages to most attorneys. Victoria had spent countless hours with expert witnesses, poring over technical specifications and building her client's case piece by methodical piece. Her client, Elena Martinez, was a soft-spoken woman in her 50s whose father had died 3 days after receiving the XR7 valve. The surgery had been routine, the kind of procedure performed thousands of times each year with minimal risk. But Carlos Martinez had suffered massive complications, and Elena was convinced that the valve itself had been to blame. "My father was healthy," Elena had told Victoria during their first meeting, tears streaming down her weathered face. He's 73 years old, and he still worked in his garden every day. The doctors said the surgery would give him another 20 years. Instead, it killed him in 3 days. Victoria had taken the case not just because of the potential career advancement, but because Elena's pain had been genuine and heartbreaking. The woman had lost her father and couldn't understand why, and she deserved answers. She deserved justice, and through it all, Marcus had been there, challenging every motion, questioning every witness, forcing Victoria to be sharper and more prepared than she'd ever been in her life. Their courtroom battles had become legendary among the local legal community, drawing observers who came just to watch two legal minds clash with surgical precision. Victoria would present evidence with mathematical clarity, only to watch Marcus dismantle it with elegant counter-arguments that revealed flaws she'd never considered. He would call witnesses who seemed unshakable, only to have Victoria expose critical inconsistencies in their testimony with the kind of cross-examination that made seasoned attorneys take notes. They were perfectly matched opponents, and everyone could see it. "You know," her friend and fellow associate Jennifer Morrison had said after a particularly intense day of testimony, "the way you two go at each other in court is almost sexual." "That's disgusting, Jen," Victoria had protested, though she'd felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and something else she didn't want to examine. "I'm serious. All that tension, all that focused intensity. You're like two dancers who know each other's moves perfectly, or two fighters who respect each other too much to hold back." Jennifer had grinned wickedly. "Half the courthouse thinks you two are going to either kill each other or rip each other's clothes off." Victoria had tried to dismiss Jennifer's observation, but she couldn't deny that something electric happened when she and Marcus faced off in court. Every argument felt like a carefully choreographed dance. Every objection like a chess move in a game, only they understood. The intellectual stimulation was intoxicating, and Victoria found herself looking forward to their battles with an anticipation that went beyond professional interest. The worst part was that she was starting to enjoy losing to him almost as much as she enjoyed winning. Outside the courtroom, their interactions had been scrupulously professional but increasingly warm. Marcus would hold doors for her, offer genuine compliments on her legal strategy, even share the occasional joke during breaks in testimony. Victoria found herself laughing more than she had in years, found herself looking forward to their brief conversations in the hallway. She also found herself noticing things she had no business noticing. The way Marcus's eyes crinkled when he smiled. How he had a habit of running his hand through his dark hair when he was thinking deeply about a problem. The fact that he always wore a small silver watch that looked antique and probably had sentimental value. The way he treated court reporters and bailiffs with the same courtesy he showed judges, suggesting a fundamental decency that most high-powered attorneys seem to lack. You're attracted to him, Jennifer had observed with typical bluntness during one of their weekly happy hour sessions. I am not. Victoria, you spent 45 minutes yesterday describing the way he cross-examined your expert witness on polymer engineering. You used the word brilliant 8 times and masterful 6 times. He is brilliant. That doesn't mean I'm attracted to him. And when you told me about his opening statement technique, you were practically glowing, like, literally glowing. I thought you might be having some kind of medical episode. Victoria had wanted to argue, but she'd known Jennifer was right. There was something intoxicating about watching Marcus work, about matching wits with someone who could not only keep up with her intellectually, but actually push her to be better. Most of the lawyers she knew were either intimidated by her or tried to diminish her accomplishments. Marcus treated her like an equal and challenged her to exceed even her own expectations. It was professional respect. She'd told herself repeatedly. Nothing more than admiration for a worthy opponent. Then came the night that changed everything. Victoria had been working late again, alone in her office as rain pelted the windows of the 32nd floor. She'd been reviewing depositions when her phone had rung with an unknown number. Mrs. Sterling, this is Dr. Rebecca Chen from Riverside General Hospital. I'm sorry to call so late, but I have some information about the Henderson Industries case that I think you need to hear. Victoria had sat up straighter. What kind of information? I can't discuss it over the phone. Could you meet me tomorrow? There's a coffee shop called Meridian Grounds on 5th Street. 2 o'clock? Dr. Chen, I should mention that I'm not familiar with your name in connection to this case. Are you affiliated with Henderson Industries? There had been a long pause. I used to be. That's what I need to talk to you about. The line had gone dead, leaving Victoria staring at her phone with a mixture of curiosity and unease. The next afternoon, Victoria had arrived at Meridian Grounds to find a nervous-looking woman in her 40s sitting alone at a corner table. Dr. Chen had the kind of haunted expression that came from carrying terrible secrets, and her hands shook slightly as she stirred her coffee. Ms. Sterling, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Dr. Chen, before we begin, I need to ask if you're currently represented by counsel, if you're still affiliated with Henderson Industries. I'm not. They fired me 6 months ago. Dr. Chen's voice was bitter. Officially for budget cuts. Unofficially for asking too many questions about the XR7 project. Victoria had felt her pulse quicken. What kind of questions? The kind that get you fired, Ms. Sterling. I was part of the team that developed the XR7 heart valve. I know things about that device that Henderson Industries would kill to keep secret. Such as? Dr. Chen had looked around the coffee shop nervously before leaning forward. Such as the fact that we knew about the defects before the device ever went to market. Victoria's world had shifted. You knew it was defective. We knew the polymer compound became brittle under certain temperature fluctuations. We knew it could cause catastrophic failures in patients with specific cardiovascular conditions. We knew, and Richard Henderson ordered us to proceed with clinical trials anyway. Do you have documentation of this? I have emails, test results, meeting minutes, everything. But Ms. Sterling, I need you to understand something. These people are dangerous. When I tried to blow the whistle internally, they didn't just fire me. They destroyed my career, blacklisted me from every medical research facility in the country, and made sure I'd never work in pharmaceuticals again. Victoria had felt ice forming in her stomach. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've been following your case, and I know you're fighting for justice. But I also know that Henderson Industries has resources you can't imagine. They've buried evidence before, and they'll do it again. Dr. Chen, would you be willing to testify? The woman had laughed bitterly. Testify, Ms. Sterling, I'd be signing my own death warrant. But she'd slid a flash drive across the table. Everything you need is on there. All the evidence, all the documentation. Use it wisely. Where did you get this information? From someone inside Henderson who's as disgusted as I am. Someone who has access to files that were supposed to be destroyed. Victoria had stared at the flash drive like it was a live grenade. Dr. Chen, if this information is accurate, it doesn't just prove negligence. It proves deliberate fraud. Now you're beginning to understand the scope of what you're dealing with. That evening, Victoria had sat in her apartment, staring at the flash drive and trying to process the implications. If Dr. Chen was telling the truth, Henderson Industries wasn't just liable for Elena Martinez's father's death. They were guilty of knowing deception that had potentially killed dozens of patients. But using the information would require exposing Dr. Chen as the source, which could put the woman in serious danger. It was the kind of ethical dilemma that law school professors loved to debate, but practicing attorneys prayed they'd never face. Victoria had been so lost in thought that she'd almost missed the soft knock at her door. When she'd opened it, Marcus Blackwood had been standing in her hallway, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. His usually perfect hair was mussed, his tie was loose, and there was something in his expression that looked almost like desperation. Marcus, what are you doing here? How did you even get my address? I need to talk to you, he'd said simply. May I come in? Victoria had hesitated. Having opposing counsel in her apartment was wildly inappropriate, potentially career-damaging, and definitely not something that would look good if anyone found out. But something in Marcus's expression had overridden her professional instincts. 5 minutes, she'd said, stepping aside to let him enter. Marcus had walked into her living room, taking in the organized chaos of case files and legal documents that covered every surface. You're still working on Henderson. It's my case. Of course I'm still working on it. Victoria, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to me without interrupting. She'd crossed her arms defensively. I'm listening. I know about Dr. Chen. Victoria's blood had turned to ice. What? I know she contacted you. I know what she told you. And I know about the flash drive. Marcus, I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't lie to me when... Not about this. Marcus had moved closer, his expression serious. Victoria, Dr. Chen came to me first. 3 days ago. She told me everything she told you, and she gave me copies of the same documents. Victoria had stared at him, trying to process what she was hearing. She came to you, but you're representing Henderson? Yes. So why would she? Because she knows something about me that you don't. Which is? Marcus had been quiet for a long moment, seeming to gather courage. I've been investigating Henderson Industries for the past 8 months, not as their attorney, but as someone who suspected they were hiding something. What do you mean, investigating them? I mean, I've been building a case against them, gathering evidence, documenting their cover-ups, preparing to expose everything they've done. Victoria had felt the world tilting beneath her feet. But you're their lawyer. On paper. Yes. In reality, I've been working to destroy them from the inside. That's unethical. That's career suicide. That's justice. Marcus's voice had been quiet, but firm. Victoria, when I first took this case, I genuinely believed Henderson Industries was innocent. I thought your client was looking for a payday after a tragic but unavoidable medical complication. But as I dug deeper, as I reviewed the evidence, you realized they were guilty. I realized they were monsters. Victoria had sunk onto her couch, overwhelmed. Marcus, you could be disbarred for this. Working against your client's interests, violating attorney-client privilege. I know. Then why? Why risk everything? Marcus had sat down across from her, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. Because 6 months ago, I met a lawyer who cared more about justice than winning, who fought for her client with everything she had, even when it seemed hopeless. And she reminded me why I became a lawyer in the first place. The confession had hit Victoria like a physical blow. You're talking about me. I'm talking about you. Marcus. I know this complicates things. I know we're supposed to be on opposite sides, and I know my actions have probably damaged my case beyond repair. But I couldn't let those people keep killing innocent patients just to protect their stock price. Victoria had looked at him, really looked at him, and seen something that made her chest tight. This wasn't the ruthless corporate attorney she'd been fighting for months. This was a man who'd risked everything because he couldn't live with injustice. What happens now? She'd asked quietly. Now you use the evidence, Doctor. Chen provided to destroy Henderson Industries in court. You win your case, get justice for Elena Martinez, and probably save hundreds of future patients. And you? Marcus had smiled sadly. I'll probably lose my job, maybe my license, but at least I'll be able to sleep at night. Marcus, there has to be another way. Some approach that doesn't destroy your career. Victoria, I made my choice the moment I decided that doing the right thing mattered more than protecting my reputation. Before Victoria could respond, Marcus had stood to leave. But something in his expression had stopped her. Wait, she'd said suddenly. There might be a way to protect you. What do you mean? I mean, what if we work together? Officially. What if you withdraw from representing Henderson and help me build the case against them? Marcus had stared at her. "You'd want to work with me? After I've been lying to you for months?" "You haven't been lying. You've been fighting for justice in the only way you could. And Marcus..." Victoria had stood, moving closer to him. "I can't think of anyone I'd rather have as a partner than the lawyer who's been pushing me to be better every day for the past 6 months." Something had shifted in Marcus's expression then. Hope and gratitude and something deeper that made Victoria's heart race. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure. Even though working together will probably generate more gossip than our courtroom battles." Victoria had laughed, despite the seriousness of the situation. "Let them talk. We have bigger things to worry about than office gossip." Such as? "Such as the fact that if we're going to destroy Henderson Industries, we need to do it right. No half measures, no plea bargains, no settlements that let them escape real consequences." "Agreed." "And Marcus?" "Yeah? If we're going to be partners, you need to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll never lie to me again. About the case, about your motivations, about anything. If we're going to do this, we do it with complete honesty." Marcus had held out his hand. "I promise." When Victoria had shaken it, she'd felt that same electric shock from their first meeting. But this time, instead of professional rivalry, it felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. That had been 2 months ago. Since then, Victoria and Marcus had worked together with an intensity that had surprised them both. They'd spent countless hours reviewing documents, interviewing witnesses, and building what they both knew would be the most important case of their careers. Working with Marcus had been a revelation. Victoria had always been brilliant, but having a partner who could match her intellectually, who could anticipate her arguments and strengthen her strategies, had elevated her work to a level she'd never achieved alone. They complemented each other perfectly. Where Victoria was methodical and precise, Marcus was intuitive and creative. Where he was charming and persuasive, she was analytical and thorough. They'd also spent those 2 months falling deeper in love, though neither had been willing to acknowledge it directly. There were late nights in the office when they'd look up from their work to find themselves staring at each other. There were moments when their hands would brush while reaching for the same document, sending sparks through both of them. There were conversations that lasted until dawn, covering everything from legal philosophy to personal dreams. But they'd maintained professional boundaries, both knowing that their case was too important to complicate with personal feelings. Elena Martinez and potentially hundreds of other patients depended on them to stay focused, which brought Victoria back to today, standing in the courthouse lobby with champagne on her shoes and her heart in her throat. They'd won the case. The evidence against Henderson Industries had been overwhelming, and the jury had awarded Elena Martinez not just the $50 million she'd sought, but an additional $25 million in punitive damages. It was a verdict that would send shockwaves through the medical device industry and potentially save countless lives. But Marcus had paid a price that Victoria was only beginning to understand. During his closing argument, Marcus had done something unprecedented. Instead of defending Henderson Industries, he'd systematically demolished their case. He'd presented evidence of their cover-up, highlighted their negligence, and essentially served as a second prosecutor, working alongside Victoria. It had been career suicide. performed with dignity and passion that left the entire courtroom speechless. And as Victoria had watched him throw away everything he'd worked for in the name of justice, as she'd seen the integrity and courage that defined him at his core, she'd realized that she wasn't just attracted to Marcus Blackwood. She was completely, irrevocably, desperately in love with him. That evening, Victoria sat in her apartment, staring at the legal documents spread across her coffee table. The Henderson case was over, but she couldn't bring herself to celebrate. All she could think about was Marcus and the price he'd paid for doing the right thing. The partnership offer from Whitmore and Associates was sitting on her desk, the culmination of everything she'd worked for since law school. Corner office, prestigious clients, financial security, everything she'd dreamed of was within reach. But as she thought about Marcus's closing argument, about the passion in his voice when he'd spoken about justice and accountability, Victoria realized that success felt hollow when it came at the expense of someone you loved. Her phone rang. Jennifer. Victoria, I heard about the verdict. $75 million. Do you realize what this means? You've won the biggest case in the firm's history. Henderson Industries is finished, and you're definitely making partner. I know. You don't sound happy. Victoria, this is everything you've wanted. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Jen, what do you do when you realize the thing you've wanted most isn't what you thought it would be? What do you mean? I mean, I got everything I wanted. The win, the recognition, the partnership track. But watching Marcus sacrifice his career for justice, Victoria trailed off. I realized that winning didn't matter as much as I thought it did. Victoria, are you having some kind of quarter-life crisis? Maybe. I don't know. I just keep thinking about what Marcus said, about caring more about justice than winning. When did I stop feeling that way? You've always cared about justice. Have I? Or have I just cared about being right, about advancing my career? Jennifer was quiet on the other end of the line. Vic, this sounds like more than professional soul-searching. What do you mean? I mean, this sounds like you're in love with Marcus Blackwood. Victoria felt her chest tighten. That's ridiculous. Is it? You've been obsessed with him for months. You've talked about him more than any other topic. And now you're having an existential crisis because he did something noble. He's been my opponent, my rival, and it's complicated. Love usually is. Victoria ended the call and sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, trying to make sense of the emotions churning inside her. She was in love with Marcus Blackwood. There was no point in denying it anymore. But what was she supposed to do with that information? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Victoria, it's Marcus. I got your number from the court clerk's office. I hope that's not inappropriate. Could we talk? There's something I need to tell you before word gets out tomorrow. Victoria stared at the message, her heart racing. What's happening tomorrow? I'd rather explain in person. Are you free for dinner? Somewhere neutral. I promise this isn't about the case. Victoria typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on. Rossini's at 8? Perfect. And Victoria? Thank you for fighting so hard for justice. Win or lose, it's been an honor to work alongside you. As Victoria got ready for dinner, She tried to prepare herself for whatever Marcus wanted to tell her. Maybe he was leaving town. Maybe he'd already been fired. Maybe he wanted to clear the air before they inevitably faced each other in future cases. What she wasn't prepared for was the possibility that he might feel the same way about her that she felt about him. Rossini's was a small Italian restaurant tucked away in the old part of the city, far enough from the legal district to avoid running into colleagues. Victoria arrived early and was seated at a corner table, nervously checking her reflection in the window and trying to calm her racing pulse. She'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that was professional enough to maintain boundaries, but flattering enough to... What? She wasn't even sure what she wanted from this dinner. Marcus arrived exactly at 8, looking handsome and slightly nervous in a charcoal suit she'd never seen him wear in court. When he spotted her, his face lit up with a smile that made her stomach flutter with something that had nothing to do with nervousness. "Victoria," he said as he approached the table, "thank you for coming. Thank you for asking." Victoria gestured to the seat across from her. "This is different. Good different or bad different? I haven't decided yet." Marcus laughed, and Victoria felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Whatever else happened tonight, at least they could still make each other laugh. "So," Victoria said once they'd ordered wine, "what's happening tomorrow that I need to know about?" Marcus's expression grew serious. "I'm leaving Blackwood and Associates." "They fired you?" "Actually, I quit. This morning, about an hour after closing arguments." Victoria felt her chest tighten. "Marcus, you didn't have to do that. Yes, what you did was unconventional, but..." "Victoria, they weren't going to fire me. They were going to promote me." "What?" Marcus took a sip of wine, seeming to gather his thoughts. "It turns out that several of the senior partners at my firm have been growing increasingly uncomfortable with Henderson Industries as a client. When I started uncovering evidence of their negligence, instead of telling me to bury it, they told me to keep digging." Victoria stared at him. "You're saying your firm wanted you to expose Henderson?" "I'm saying my firm has been looking for a way to end their relationship with Henderson for months. The company's practices were becoming a liability, and the partners were worried about their own exposure. When I brought them evidence of the cover-up, they saw an opportunity to distance themselves while positioning the firm as ethical and principled. So you weren't sacrificing your career. You were advancing it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Yes and no. The firm wanted me to expose Henderson, but they wanted me to do it quietly. Find a way to settle out of court. Maybe report the company to regulators behind the scenes. They never wanted it to become public. But you made it public anyway. I made it public because Elena Martinez deserved to have her day in court, not some backroom settlement. And because the families of the people who died deserved to see justice served openly." Victoria felt her heart skip. "You did it for Elena." "I did it for Elena, and for justice, and because..." Marcus met her eyes directly. "Because watching you fight so passionately for your client reminded me what I used to love about practicing law." "What did you used to love about it?" "The feeling that what I was doing mattered, that I was helping people, fighting for something bigger than billable hours and partnership points." Marcus leaned forward. "Victoria, when I started practicing law, I wanted to change the world. Somewhere along the way, I settled for winning cases. You reminded me that the two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. Victoria felt tears threatening and blinked them back. So what happens now? If you're leaving your firm, I'm starting my own practice. Small firm, focused on civil rights and public interest cases. It won't pay nearly as well as corporate law, but it'll pay in other ways. That's incredible. Marcus. It's terrifying, he admitted. But it feels right. For the first time in years, it feels right. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the implications of Marcus's decision. Can I ask you something? Victoria said finally. Anything. When we first started working against each other, did you know about Henderson's cover-up? I mean, Marcus shook his head. Not at first. I genuinely believed they were innocent. But as I reviewed your evidence, as I saw how thoroughly you'd researched every aspect of the case, I started asking harder questions. The more I dug, the more I realized you were right. And you could have buried that information. I could have, probably should have, from a career standpoint. But you didn't. But I didn't. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Victoria, can I tell you something else? The touch of his fingers sent electricity up her arm. What? These past 6 months, fighting you in court, working alongside you. It's been the most intellectually stimulating, professionally challenging, and personally fulfilling experience of my career. Even though I was trying to destroy your case, especially because you were trying to destroy my case, you made me better. Victoria, you pushed me to be sharper, smarter, more prepared. You never gave me an inch. Never let me get away with anything less than my absolute best. Victoria felt her cheeks warming. You did the same for me. Did I? Marcus, I've never worked harder on a case in my life. I've never had to be more creative, more thorough, more relentless. Fighting you was like playing chess with a grandmaster. Every move had to be perfect. And was it? Perfect. I mean, Victoria laughed. Hardly. You destroyed half my arguments. Only half? I must be slipping. The other half were pretty good, though. Pretty good? Victoria Sterling, your cross-examination of Henderson's chief engineer was a thing of beauty. I've never seen someone dismantle an expert witness so elegantly. You're just saying that to make me feel better about winning. I'm saying it because it's true, and because, Marcus paused, seeming to gather courage. Because I need you to understand that my respect for you isn't professional courtesy. It's genuine admiration for the most brilliant lawyer I've ever faced. Victoria felt her heart racing. Marcus, I know this is complicated. I know we've been opponents, and I know there are professional considerations. But Victoria, I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just professional respect. What do you feel for me? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you since that first deposition when you caught my expert witness in a contradiction so subtle that I almost missed it myself. I've been in love with your intelligence, your passion, your absolute refusal to back down from a fight. Victoria felt the world tilt. Marcus, I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other outside of court. I know we've spent 6 months as adversaries. But Victoria, I can't imagine practicing law without the hope of seeing you across the courtroom, of matching wits with the only person who's ever been able to keep up with me intellectually. You won't have to, Victoria said softly. What do you mean? Victoria took a deep breath, feeling like she was about to jump off a cliff. I mean, I'm in love with you too. Marcus went very still. Are you serious? Completely serious. Insanely, irrationally, career-complicatingly serious. A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. When did you know? Today, when I watched you sacrifice everything you'd worked for because it was the right thing to do. But I think I've been falling for you for months without realizing it. Even when I was being particularly brutal in court. Especially when you were being brutal in court. Marcus, do you have any idea how rare it is to find someone who can actually challenge you intellectually? Who doesn't try to diminish you or intimidate you, but just matches you? I might have some idea, Victoria laughed, feeling giddy with relief and possibility. So what do we do now? Now? Now I'm going to pay for dinner. And then I'm going to walk you home. And then I'm going to spend the next several hours kissing you if you'll let me. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we figure out how two lawyers who are completely wrong for each other can build something that feels completely right. Victoria stood, pulling Marcus up with her. I have a better idea. What's that? Let's skip dinner. The kiss happened in the restaurant parking lot, under the glow of a streetlight that cast everything in golden shadows. Marcus's hands tangled in Victoria's hair, and she pressed against him like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. It was everything she'd imagined and nothing like she'd expected, soft and desperate and full of months of suppressed longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Victoria laughed. What's funny? Marcus asked. I was just thinking. We're probably the only couple in history who fell in love through legal briefs and courtroom arguments. Is that what we are? A couple? Victoria looked up into his face, seeing hope and vulnerability and something that looked like forever in his dark eyes. I'd like to find out. Even though we're both stubborn, competitive, workaholic lawyers with trust issues and a tendency to argue about everything, especially because of that. Marcus kissed her again, softer this time, full of promise and possibility. Victoria? For what it's worth, I think we're going to be incredible together. In court or out of it? Both. As they walked to Victoria's apartment, hands intertwined, Victoria couldn't help but smile. 6 months ago, if someone had told her she'd fall in love with her courtroom rival, she'd have recommended therapy. Now, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. Marcus? Yeah? Next time we're on opposite sides of a case, I'm still going to try to destroy you professionally. I wouldn't have it any other way. Good. Because I don't believe in taking it easy on people I love. Love? Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. Love. Crazy. Unexpected. Completely inconvenient love. I love you too. Victoria Sterling. Even if you are going to make my professional life infinitely more complicated. Baudice, especially because I'm going to make your professional life infinitely more complicated. As they resumed walking, Victoria realized that winning the Henderson case had been the least important thing that had happened to her today. Far more significant was the discovery that the best opponent she'd ever faced might also be the perfect partner she'd never known she was looking for. Their relationship, she suspected, would be a lifelong negotiation. Two strong-willed lawyers learning to be partners instead of adversaries, figuring out how to channel their competitive natures into building something together instead of tearing each other apart. It would be messy and complicated, and probably involve a lot of arguing. Victoria couldn't wait. Victoria's apartment was a reflection of her personality, organized chaos with stacks of legal documents arranged in perfect order, expensive furniture mixed with law school remnants, and bookshelves lined with everything from Supreme Court decisions to Italian cookbooks. Marcus took it all in with curious eyes as Victoria nervously offered him coffee. I should probably warn you, she said, busying herself in the kitchen. I'm not very good at this. At making coffee? At this. Dating. Relationships. Having opposing counsel in my apartment at midnight. She turned to face him, suddenly vulnerable. Marcus, I've spent so much time focused on my career that I'm not sure I know how to be anything other than a lawyer. Marcus moved closer, taking the coffee mug from her hands and setting it aside. Victoria, you've been more than just a lawyer to me from the moment we met. You've been a challenge, an inspiration, a worthy opponent. And now... He cupped her face gently. Now you're the woman I love. This is going to change everything, she whispered. Everything, he agreed. Is that okay? Instead of answering with words, Victoria kissed him again, and this time neither of them held back. Months of professional tension and suppressed attraction poured out in that kiss, and when it ended, they were both breathing hard. Stay, Victoria said softly. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. 3 months later, Victoria stood in her new office at Whitmore and Associates, staring at the nameplate that read Victoria Sterling, partner. She'd achieved everything she'd dreamed of when she'd started at the firm 5 years ago. Corner office, prestigious clients, respect from her peers. But as she looked out the window at the courthouse across the street, all she could think about was the man who'd made her realize that success meant more than just winning. Knock, knock. Marcus appeared in her doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the smile that still made her stomach flutter. What are you doing here? Victoria asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by and congratulate the newest partner at Whitmore and Associates. Flattery will get you nowhere. Blackwood. What about this? Marcus pulled a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. Victoria eyed it suspiciously. What is it? Open it and find out. Inside the package was a small leather-bound book titled How to win friends and influence juries. Victoria laughed despite herself. Very funny. I thought you might need some pointers. You know, in case we ever face each other again. Marcus Blackwood, are you implying that I need help with my courtroom presence? I'm implying that I've learned a few new tricks since our last case. Victoria set down the book and moved closer to him. Is that a challenge? Maybe. Because if you're challenging me to a legal duel, you should know that I'm currently undefeated against stubborn, idealistic lawyers who think they know better than me. Currently undefeated? I seem to remember winning a few arguments during the Henderson case. Those don't count. You were on my side. Marcus laughed and pulled her into his arms. I'm always on your side, Victoria. Even when we're arguing. Even when we're on opposite sides of a case? Even then. Because being your opponent taught me something important. What's that? That the best kind of love is the kind that makes you better. The kind that challenges you and pushes you and never lets you settle for less than your absolute best. Victoria felt her heart swell. That's very romantic. For a lawyer. I learned from the best. Speaking of which, Victoria said, pulling back slightly. I have some news. Good news or bad news? That depends on your perspective. I've been assigned a new case. Medical malpractice. Very complex. Very high profile. Congratulations. Who's the opposing counsel? Victoria grinned. Some hotshot public interest lawyer who thinks he can take on the big corporate firms. Marcus's eyes widened. Are you serious? Dead serious. Marcus Blackwood versus Victoria Sterling. Round 2. Think you can handle it? Think you can. I know I can. The question is whether our relationship can handle another 6 months of legal warfare. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering. Victoria, can I tell you something? Always. I'm looking forward to it. Fighting you in court. Going head to head with the woman I love. Knowing that at the end of the day, we go home together. There's something incredibly appealing about that. Even if I destroy your case, even if you destroy my case, because win or lose, I get to watch you do what you do best. And there's nothing sexier than watching Victoria Sterling demolish opposing counsel. Victoria kissed him then, there in her new office with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows and the promise of future battles stretching out before them. Marcus? This is going to be fun. Absolutely. And complicated. Extremely. And probably ethically questionable. Almost certainly. Victoria smiled against his lips. Perfect. As they held each other in the growing afternoon light, Victoria reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. A year ago, she'd been a driven associate focused solely on making partner. Now she was a partner in love with her greatest rival. Looking forward to a future filled with legal battles and professional challenges and the kind of intellectual partnership she'd never imagined possible. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was the life she'd never known she wanted. And when her phone rang with news of their first court date, Victoria Sterling smiled and began planning her strategy for the most important case of her career, proving to Marcus Blackwood that love was the one argument she'd never lose. But as Marcus watched Victoria work, her brow furrowed in concentration. He couldn't shake the feeling that their story was just beginning, because tomorrow morning, when he thought she'd be at home preparing for their case, he'd be at Cartier, selecting a ring for the woman who'd taught him that the best victories were the ones you shared with someone worth fighting alongside. The phone call that would change everything came on a rainy Thursday morning, exactly 6 months after their first kiss. Victoria was in her office, reviewing discovery documents for their latest case, a pharmaceutical liability suit that had pitted them against each other once again, when her assistant knocked on the door. "Victoria, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." Victoria looked up from her files, annoyed at the interruption. "I don't have any appointments scheduled. She says her name is Elena Martinez. She seems upset." Victoria's blood ran cold. Elena Martinez, their client from the Henderson Industries case, should have been living comfortably on her settlement. She had no reason to visit Victoria's office unless something was seriously wrong. "Send her in." Elena entered looking haggard and frightened, a stark contrast to the relieved woman Victoria had last seen 6 months ago. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands shook as she clutched a manila envelope. "Ms. Sterling, I'm sorry to bother you, but I didn't know where else to go." "Elena, what's wrong? Has something happened with the settlement?" "No. The money. The money's fine. This is about something else." Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. "About why my father really died." Victoria felt the room grow cold. "Oh, Elena. We proved that Henderson's valve was defective. The case is closed. The valve was defective, yes. But that's not why my father died." Elena slid the envelope across Victoria's desk with trembling fingers. "A man came to see me last week. Said he used to work for Henderson Industries. He gave me this." Victoria opened the envelope with growing dread. Inside were medical records, test results, and what appeared to be intercepted communications between Henderson Industries and Riverside General Hospital. As she read, Victoria's world began to collapse. The documents revealed that Carlos Martinez hadn't died from a defective heart valve. He died because someone at Riverside General had deliberately sabotaged his surgery, making it appear as though the valve had failed. The surgery had been a setup, designed to provide Henderson Industries with a convenient scapegoat for their defective product while eliminating a potential witness. Because Carlos Martinez hadn't just been a patient. He'd been a former Henderson Industries engineer who'd helped design the XR7 valve. And according to these documents, he'd been planning to testify about the company's cover-up. "Elena." Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "Do you understand what this means? It means they murdered my father, and it means you and Mr. Blackwood have been fighting the wrong battle." Victoria's hands shook as she reached for her phone to call Marcus. But before she could dial, her office door burst open. Marcus stood there, his face pale and his usually perfect composure completely shattered. "Victoria, we need to talk. Now." "Marcus, I was just about to call you. Elena brought some documents that..." "I know about the documents. I know about Carlos Martinez. And I know who's been orchestrating this entire thing." Victoria stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Marcus moved into the office, closing the door behind him and checking to make sure no one was listening. Victoria, the pharmaceutical case we're working on now, Meridian Industries versus the Peterson family, it's connected to Henderson. It's all connected. That's impossible. Meridian is a completely different company. Meridian is a subsidiary of Henderson Industries, hidden through layers of shell companies and offshore accounts. And the Peterson family? They're being represented by the same law firm that was supposed to defend Henderson before I quit. Victoria felt the pieces clicking together with horrifying clarity. You're saying this has all been orchestrated? I'm saying we've been pawns in someone else's game from the very beginning. Elena looked between them, her face growing pale. What does this mean for my father? Marcus sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. It means your father was murdered, Elena. And it means Victoria and I have been manipulated into fighting each other while the real criminals have been covering their tracks. But who would have the resources to orchestrate something like this? Victoria asked. Someone with connections to the legal system, the medical community, and enough money to buy silence from anyone who gets too close to the truth. Victoria's blood turned to ice as realization dawned. Patricia Whitmore. Your senior partner? Think about it. Marcus. She assigned me the Henderson case specifically. She knew exactly who would be representing them. She's been monitoring our progress, our relationship, everything. Marcus stared at her. You think your own firm is involved in this conspiracy? I think my own firm has been using us to clean up someone else's mess. Henderson Industries was supposed to lose that case. Marcus. They needed a scapegoat, and they needed it to look legitimate. So they arranged for the best plaintiff's attorney in the city to face off against a defense attorney who would eventually switch sides. Jesus Christ. Victoria, if you're right. If I'm right, then we've been playing out a script that was written months before we ever met. Elena's voice was small and frightened. What do we do now? Victoria looked at Marcus, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. Now we stop playing by their rules. But as Victoria reached for her phone to call the FBI, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. Because at that very moment, Patricia Whitmore was sitting in her corner office, making a phone call that would ensure Victoria Sterling and Marcus Blackwood never left the building alive. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, and the stakes had just become life and death. Victoria, Marcus said quietly, there's something else you need to know. What? The ring I've been carrying around for the past 3 weeks? I was planning to propose to you tonight. Despite everything, Victoria felt her heart skip. Marcus, I know this isn't the time or place, but if we're about to walk into something dangerous, I need you to know that I want to spend whatever time we have left fighting alongside you. Victoria reached across her desk and took his hand. Ask me anyway. What? Ask me anyway. Because if we're going to take down a conspiracy, face down murderers, and probably end our careers in the process, I'd rather do it as your fiancée than your girlfriend. Marcus stared at her for a moment, then broke into the most beautiful smile she'd ever seen. He dropped to one knee right there in her office, pulling out a ring that was perfect in its simplicity. Victoria Sterling, Will you marry me? Yes, she said without hesitation. But we're having the shortest engagement in legal history, because I'm not waiting to marry you until after we solve this case. Deal. Elena, who had been watching this exchange with growing amazement, finally spoke up. Are you two insane? People are trying to kill us, and you're getting engaged? Victoria and Marcus looked at each other and started laughing. Elena, Victoria said, slipping the ring onto her finger. You're about to learn something important about lawyers in love, which is, we're absolutely, completely, and dangerously insane. But, Marcus added, standing and pulling Victoria into his arms, we're also very good at winning impossible cases. As they kissed in her office, with danger closing in around them and their entire world about to change, Victoria realized that she'd finally found what she'd been searching for her entire career. Not just victory, but a partner worth fighting for. The war was just beginning, but Victoria Sterling had never felt more ready for battle. Because this time, she wasn't fighting alone.